My Very Last Life, Chapter 11, Dickens versus Marx. I've tried this several times, actually, several years, one after the other, to read Dickens, or listen to on Audible. You know, I'm into listening to books now, audiobooks. Listening to Dickens' A Christmas Carol, the original, for the first time. I've never listened to it or heard it or read it. I've never read the original. I've always, seen the movies, right? And you can't help but see the movie, so you know the story. You just know the story. It's like reading it is like reading it for the reading it for the first time is like reading it for the 10th time, basically, because you know the story. But I thought, wouldn't it be a good tradition to, on a Christmas Eve, to sit down and read the story? And so Astrid was busy with something, so I sat down and I started listening to the story. I even went out for a walk and walked while I listened to the story on Audible, and it was very good. It was very nice, but I didn't finish it. It was like an hour, 45 minutes left, and then we did Christmas and all that. And so recently, last week, in fact, I decided I wanted to go back and listen to the end, because it's a great story. And there were some differences to the stories, the versions that I know from the movies. I think the movies, of course, I'm talking about the movies now from memory, so I may be getting the movies wrong also, but the movies, I think, are slightly better in that his resistance as he goes through these three ghosts, the ghost, it's actually four with Marley, that goes through Christmas past, present, and future. The three ghosts, in the movies, it takes longer for him to break down, and just you don't see him breaking down, so you don't know what his reaction to this is going to be until he wakes up the next morning and jumps up and throws open the shades and the shutters and says Merry Christmas, and so it's this the revelation of the change, the stress on this new Scrooge, the new man, and the joyousness of the change is much stronger in the movies, or at least the movies I have in my memory, than it is in the book. In the book, around the time of the second ghost or so, he's already broken down and he's changed, and he says, "No, stop it! I got it. I get the picture. I'm a new man. I promise. Don't stop. Just stop torturing me." But the torture goes on, and it's unnecessary. And so I think this is one of the it's a small thing, but it's an improvement on the book. But anyway, it's a beautiful book. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's, of course, stunningly original. It's brilliant. And of course, it of all those things of Christmas, we have a lot of nations have contributed to Christmas, including Germany has contributed a lot to Christmas. The Christmas tree comes from Germany and all kinds of stuff. This contribution to Christmas of kind of this basic kind of Victorian London, this we snow London carriages, the Christmas carols of that time. That's what we associate with Christmas. That's a great. That's all Dickens. It all comes from the story. It's like he created, 40% of Christmas right there with this story. And so, but anyway, but beyond that, and Christmas is over, so I shouldn't even be. I should save this podcast, this theme for next year. But when I listened to that last week, I realized that it's really beautiful for another thing. It's beautiful for the human sentiment of it, the humanity of it. He comes right out and says it, what it is to be human. And he basically says the only time of the year, of course, it's a Christmas story, so he has to say that, right? The only time of the year that we are really human to each other is Christmas. It's because it brings out this basic core humanity in us, and all the other things in our lives. The struggle, the opinions, the fight for right and for protecting what is ours, and struggling to make something out, to find ourselves. All these things are very important, and they're very prominent in the rest of our lives. But at Christmas time, for some reason, it's just one of those seasons, one of those things. It breaks all that down, and it breaks down human beings to kind of the core of what we should be in society, as a social creature, which is, humanity, being nice to forgiving each other, being nice to each other, and that made me think about Marx. I gotta tell you, I maybe I'm the only one in the world who associates Dickens with Marx. I'm probably not. Probably this idea has been, probably it's been out there for some time. I don't know. But Dickens and Marx had a lot in common. They were both in London. They were born at around the same time, I think, within 10 years of each other. They both died within 10 years or maybe 15 years of each other, something like that. So they occupied the same era. It was like, 1825 to 1875, something that middle chunk of the 19th century. And they were both in London at around the same time. Marx came and lived in London after studying philosophy in I guess in Berlin mainly, and he lived there at the same time. They both lived in London at the same time. Dickens was famous before Marx was. I'm not sure if Marx was actually famous during his own lifetime, but he had not published. Dickens had published and was famous for publishing before Marx published. So Dickens, fairly early in his life, became a published and a well-known published writer, and therefore also rich and privileged. And he had a podium immediately, whereas Marx did not have a podium. He had little clubs, and people he would correspond with, but he did not have this podium that Dickens had. And when Marx started writing, or starting his great works, his famous works, the works that are now famous, Dickens had already had lots of famous works behind him. So that's the difference, and of course the main difference is, Marx, the savior of the working class, had nothing to do with the working class. He was nothing whatsoever. Dickens had because his father was in the poorhouse, he had to work as a kid, and so he got to know the working class very well. He was part of it, basically. He was uneducated. He taught himself to read and write. He taught himself journalism. He went into journalism early, so he got a foothold in the privileged elite class very early. But he doesn't come from that class. He was not born in that class. He was born, his father was in the workhouse. It was in the poorhouse, and he was in the workhouse. He had to work, as a kid instead of getting an education. Marx was, the son of a well-off lawyer who had converted from Judaism to Protestantism because I guess wanted to be a part of the, elite society. So he was an elite lawyer, and Marx studied law at all the best universities, and he had all contacts to all the intellectuals of his day, and he slowly went from studying law into studying philosophy. So he was a philosopher. So he was hip, he was cool, that was the thing to do, and so he was this intellectual, and he didn't know the only thing that Marx, if you look at his biography, the only contact that Marx ever had with the working class was when he got his maid, kitchen maid pregnant. That was it. That's his contact. That's the Marx's practical connection to the working class is abusing his power to get some woman pregnant and just. Good grief! What can I say? Anyway, so Marx also, he married into the nobility. His wife was a poorish, toppled, no longer powerful aristocrat or family of aristocrats. So Marx was completely of the elite, and his thinking was of the elite. He never saw himself as an economist. We say he's an economist now, but he never was. He was a philosopher. And if you read his books, also it's written in a philosopher's tone. He gets to a lot of good points about the economics, and the economists today still take him seriously on those points. They don't take him seriously on his predictions of what would happen in the world and how to solve the world's problems, because all of that clearly, was bullshit. It clearly was nonsense. But some of the observations that he made about economics, about economics, and how he materialized it and qualified it and quantified things, that is still taken very seriously. Okay, granted that, but he saw himself as a philosopher, and he saw himself as part of this intellectual elite, whereas Dickens always saw himself as a guy who had escaped and was grateful for escaping from, the working class, and that's what he was. And he understood the working class, and he knew what it was all about. He he saw it. He was there, and he wrote about it in a way that everyone could understand. And so the thing is, when I think about the two of them, when I compare the two of them, of course, I'm clearly on, Team Dickens. A friend of mine, Curtis, he dislikes Dickens, and we've had this conversation a couple times. He just thinks Dickens was kitschy and sentimental, which he was. He was very sentimental and very kitschy, and that was, the mood of the time. And I guess it's a mood of all times, really. We're still sentimental and kitschy today, and I have no problem with that, frankly. But it was one of the reasons that I went back to Dickens and started reading him again was because of this conversation with Curtis, where he said Dickens was just a bad writer, and I can see why he would think he's a bad writer. If you don't like him, that's fine with me. And any criticism of any writing and any style there's so many kinds of writing styles out there, that any criticism of any direction, any kind, any class, any school of writing is valid criticism. And so that's fine. But I got to say, I really like him. It's humanity. And that's the thing that Marx didn't have. Marx had an intellectual system, but he did not have the actual human beings. He did not understand the human beings, even as an element of economics. He didn't understand human beings. That's what went wrong with communism. He didn't understand that human beings want to get paid for what they do, and if they do more than the other guy, they want to get paid for the other guy, and if they can't do that, they will leave the country. That's one of the basic problem with communists. The guys who were able to achieve left the country. And that's why all socialist or these quasi-communist, these extreme socialist, these communist systems don't work because they immediately people start leaving the country, and so they have to close up the borders and institute a secret police to keep people from working against the state, and then it just goes downhill and just goes to hell from there. So this human element, Marx had no idea about it whatsoever. He was completely blind to it. He was lost. He only understood system. But Dickens understood humanity. And the reason why that's important to me, and I think I've said this before, and I keep coming back to it, is because living in Germany, I think more about what Germans have contributed to world history. And looking back, I look at like for example, recently or some time ago, I looked at the lists of Nobel Prizes, and every country has a certain number of Nobel Prizes. In the Western world, they all probably have about the same. Americans have many more Nobel Prizes than everyone else, but it's a much larger country. It's 4 times larger than Germany. So if you divide the Nobel Prizes that America has by 4, it's roughly about the same number as in Germany. So it's about the same. These large Western countries have about the same number of Nobel Prizes, which kind of indicates a certain amount of contribution that they have to human society. That is a certain standard of recognition for the contribution a country makes to history. You could argue whether it's inaccurate or not, but it doesn't matter. It is a good standard to judge by. And if you look at the Nobel Prizes of Germany, they have basically the same amount of Nobel Prizes for chemistry and for physics and for math and for medicine. Is there a medicine? I think there is the medicine Nobel Prize, and for literature, of course. But the two things that the Germans just never get Nobel Prizes on are on economics and Peace Prize, which is the political prize. Economics and politics. Germans can't do it. They just don't know how. They only have, in those two things, I think they only have 2 Nobel Prizes each. And if you look at the big contributions that Germany has made to economics, it's Marxism, and it doesn't work. And if you look at the big contributions that Germans made to politics, the big German ideas about politics, it's Marxism and National Socialism. the two worst ideas ever created by man, and the two, more deaths and destruction and oppression were done in more efficiently and in less time than any other idea in the world, any idea at all. No idea has been worse than these two ideas, and that's a German contribution to world history. And and no one talks about it because it's really embarrassing. And Germans think of themselves as a very political people. They are extremely political, but what they mean by politics is that they want the state to do more for them and for their lives. And they believe in the state. They don't believe necessarily in the party. They will say, the left will say the right party is bad, and the right will say the left is bad. But none of them will say the state is a problem. The state, they will all say, we have to change the state, let's change the system, but we need more state. We don't need less state. We need more state. And this idea that Germans often had when it comes to politics, that all you need is a good system and all our problems will be solved. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not that much. It's a very German idea. And when I talk, young, forward-thinking, progressive, pseudo-intellectual, new generation Germans, it all comes down to the same. It all comes down to the state has to be perfected. It's like building the perfect car. If you can get the perfect car, then, it's the perfect mode of transportation. If you get the perfect state, you just get it so that it works perfectly. The system has to work perfectly. Then everything will be good. But of course, in reality, it doesn't work like that. It'd be nice, but it doesn't. And Marx was a lot of, when I think of Marx, I'm exaggerating. I'm no expert in Marx. Okay, I got it, right? So, caveat. But Marx was all about the system, creating a system that would make everything just and good, replacing all the injustice in the world with a system that is foolproof, that would work just like the perfect car. That's the idea. And that's why Marxism is so attractive to so many Germans especially, but also to a lot of young people everywhere. A lot of people everywhere. I say young people because, well, it tends to be young people who are attracted to this idea that a system can change everything. But of course it can't. You can't, especially not a system where just one guy envisions it. Capitalism and democracy have grown since the Middle Ages, since the Magna Carta, and capitalism in Germany since, the Hansa, since the system of capitalism in Germany, the Middle Ages. It's an organic system that is grown up and is still growing and still changing and still, faulty, but it's getting better every year. And it always has been. And then this guy comes along and says, I'll do a complete different system, and it's perfect because I'm a genius, right? So there's also this German need for a messiah, for a genius to come along like Hitler was, and he's figured it all out. He knows all the problems. He can solve all the problems. And Marx has figured out all the problems. He's got the perfect system. He can solve it. Marx and Hitler were basically the same guy. I don't know. So the system. Okay, so I juxtapose Marx with Dickens because Dickens was the exact opposite. He was not interested in a system at all. He was interested in the humanity. Well, he was interested in the system in the sense of that he was very active in a social sense, and his books, of course, were full of social awareness of changing things in the system, but not the overarching system of society. He wasn't interested in getting rid of capitalism. What he wanted to do was make better workhouses, or better work laws, or better poorhouse, or abolish certain laws that were unjust, or abolish certain laws that were only oriented toward the elite and not toward the guy, the working class or the poor, or did not take into consideration, human folly. He was interested in tweaking the system because he didn't imagine that he was this brilliant guy who could make, he wasn't God who could create the perfect system. All he wanted to do was saying, look, this law is unfair. It has to be changed. All he wanted to do was let women go to university, because he said women should be going to the women should have an education. They should be going to university. He established a foundation or some kind of thing for women, poor women, and to give them money to go to university. That is the actual problem that we have, and it's a solution to the actual problem. It's not some kind of abstract, overarching problem, which is so abstract, so much in the cloud, so much in a structure that it has nothing to do with what's really happening. He's looked at one thing. These women do not have an education. They need an education. They don't have the money for it. We got to get together the money so they can have the education. They can go to university. And he did it. And so when you ask yourself, who in the end, who had more influence or who had more positive influence in the world, Dickens or Marx? You would have to say Marx had more influence. He created, the without wanting to, I suppose, maybe, he created the worst dictatorships, the worst tyrannies, the worst states the world has ever seen, single-handedly. And at least, Hitler, he only created one really horrible, brutal, inhumane state. He would have created, he would have, ruled the entire world if he could have. But Marx inspired, because he's considered the good guy, he inspired, 50, I look it up, 50, there are 50 states that claim to be socialist states. And of course, they're not all extreme socialist states, communist states. They're just, some are just socialist in words. But Marxism has been used to justify more inhumanity than any other writer in the world. It really is this guy. And but Dickens only did things. He probably failed with a lot of things. A lot of things he did probably did not work. But in his writing, in the platform he had, he was, of course, he had a platform, right? He was famous anyway. So there's a lot of good people with a lot of good ideas out there who don't have the platform and cannot do. But he did a lot of good just because he saw the humanity. And he said, a boy, young boy, a kid, a child, a girl has to have a childhood, and he has to have an education. And it's worth it for the rich people to give a little money to the poor people so they can have an education, so they don't have to suffer. You know what I mean? And that makes sense. It's the humanity of it that makes sense. The system does not make sense. And this is going, and maybe there's too much of a Mormon in this. Maybe I'm too much of a Mormon, because the Mormons have this rather brilliant idea of the preexistence. It's a Protestant idea, but the Mormons take this Protestant idea of the preexistence a step further. You read it in Milton, Paradise Lost, the angels in heaven, they get together and, the devil has a plan. The devil, rebels against God and is cast down. Right? That's the idea of the preexistence. The Mormons think of the preexistence as the spirit children of God in heaven, in the preexistence heaven, gathered around God, and God says, "Okay, I've created this world, and we're all going to go down there, and you're going to have a physical body and learn what to decide whether you're going to be good or bad, between sin and non-sin, between, You're going to have the challenges in life, and up here, living with me in heaven, you don't have any challenges. You don't have to make any hard decisions about being good, about being moral. But there you will have, on earth, you will have to learn how to be moral. And if you're a good person and you prove yourself to be worthy of me, you will return to heaven. And if not, you'll be going down to hell." And so that was the one plan. But then Satan came up, Lucifer, the brightest among them. That's in the Bible. Says, "I have another plan. It's because a lot of us may not make it. So what we'll do is I'll go down and I will rule the world, and I will force everyone to be good. I won't give them another chance. I will punish them if they're bad, and I will force them to be good. I will see into their hearts. I will see what they're doing. I will watch them every minute of the day, and I will force them so that we will all return to heaven, good people, and return to be with God," which is fair enough. We all want to return. We all want to be good, right? We all want to return to God and be happy and go to heaven, right? So his plan, everyone would return to heaven. God's plan, a lot of people would go to hell. And so which plan is better? Clearly, Lucifer's plan. Everyone gets saved, right? But that's the thing. God said, no. If you you want to be good, you have to do it of your own free will, not because you're forced to do it. And this is this Mormon idea that if you force someone to be good, that in itself is evil. Only the devil will force you to be good. You have to do it of your own free will. The free will is more important than morality. That's a Mormon idea, and it's great. It's a brilliant I love that idea. It's a brilliant Mormon idea. I guess it's not only, I'm sure it's somewhere in philosophy also, but I learned it as a Mormon idea. And that's why Mormons hate communism, because Marxism is basically about forcing you to be good. You are forced not to exploit your workers. You are forced to give up your money to charity, for the rich to give to the poor. You are forced to do all these good things. It's a society that works despite human beings, and humans have to become a cog in the wheels of society and abandon their own free will for the greater good. Which is an attractive idea. I got to say, it's not all that bad, the idea. But in fact it is. In fact it is evil. And Dickens never said that. Dickens said, we're human beings. We're going to be bad, but maybe we should all get together and think about trying to be good to each other. And in a lot of things that we're doing in society right now, like the Me Too generation, the diversity generation, a psychologist once called it the diversity project, where you're trying to, this generation is basically, the turbo hippies. They're taking the values of the hippie generation, equality and environmentalism and anti-racism and all that, all these. It's the same ideas, but they're doing it. They're demanding it even more than the hippie generation did, which is basically good. I mean, you can't argue about that. Equality is a good thing, right? But it's this turbo generation where a lot of young people, especially, and I do associate it with young people because they do believe that you can get a system that will change everything. And to a certain point, it's true. At a point, like if you take for example, a gay marriage, forbidding gays to get married, same-sex marriage, is discriminatory. It discriminates against gays. It's not equal. Straight people have one law, gays have another law. That's not equal. So equality and democratic equality under the law is demands that you have a law that does not differentiate. And so the law that said only straight people can get married was unequal. It differentiated. It was discriminatory against gays. So you have to change that law. And so changing the law, which, changing the system, was basically good. And it's the foundation for the society becoming more acceptance of people who, with another sexuality, for example. So the changing of humanity, the way we as human beings see each other, is affected by the laws that we have. So you have to change the laws in order to change humanity. But there's a difference between tweaking the one law, allowing gay marriage, and tweaking the entire system. Or maybe even this. You can outlaw discrimination. You can make discrimination illegal, but you cannot make hate illegal. You can make hate crimes illegal, but you cannot make hate illegal. In other words, it's got to be legal. It has to be legal for me to be a racist, or for me to hate someone, or for men to hate women, or women to hate men. But you can make it illegal to act on that. You can make it illegal that if I don't like gays, even if I wear a t-shirt that says I hate gays, if a gay walks into my bakery and wants a cake, I got to sell it to him, because it's discriminatory not to. I cannot fire him because he's gay. It's discriminatory. I don't have to like him. I don't have to approve, maybe for religious reasons, right, of homosexuality. I don't have to approve it, but I cannot persecute him for being gay. That's a difference. So that's the difference between Marx and Dickens. Dickens says the laws can go so far, but after the laws stop, it's about being human. being human to one another. And Marx said, don't worry about being human to one another. We just change the laws and everyone will be good and everyone will go to heaven. Okay, well, maybe that's a lot of bullshit. No, it's not. It's not bullshit, actually. I stand by it, frankly. This is the big difference. The big difference. Marx has a point, or system. People who want to change the system have a point to a certain point, but it's very limited. And I think the main thing, the more important thing, is the humanity, is striving, like Dickens did, just by writing, for example, striving to make our society a more human place. That's the more important thing. That's the better thing. And that's the thing no society in the world, no state has ever taken Dickens as an excuse to, put millions of people in a gulag. That does not happen. But on the other hand, Marx has been used as that excuse many times. So, long story short, that's why I'm on Team Dickens. And the reason I went off on this rant is because of one sentence, or one paragraph. It's like a long sentence or a long paragraph in The Christmas Carol, which really stuck in my mind. It's where Bob Cratchit, or was it Bob Cratchit, the nephew, in the early scene, Scrooge goes to the nephew, and the nephew says, "Oh, I really like Christmas. Merry Christmas." And then Scrooge goes, "Bah humbug." It's the bah humbug scene, right? And the nephew gives a defense, like almost a lawyerly defense of Christmas, and it's all about humanity. And I love the word kind, like kindness. It's in this sentence, in this paragraph. And that, for me, when I read that, I thought, oh my God, this is a great book. It's about kindness. Let me read that sentence to you. Okay, the nephew says, the first part is kind of, he goes on and on. Okay, but I'll do the whole thing. The nephew says, "There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem, by one consent, to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow travelers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." Kindness. That's it, folks. And thanks for listening. Tune in again next week, or tomorrow, or whenever it is I do this again. Whatever, I don't know. If you're interested in the things that are really important to me, I write them in books and I put them on videos. Check out my books on Amazon.com, or my YouTube channel, or my Twitter and Facebook feeds, or subscribe to my newsletter. It's kind of a lot now that I say it like that. Or any of the above, whatever. I hope I can contribute something to your life, or to someone's life, anyone's life really, in some way. I appreciate your support, and I wish you all the luck and success and happiness and fulfillment in your life. Take care till next time.